Good evening, you're watching WION. I'm Swati Raina. Every time the prices of vegetables, pulses or cereals rise in the nation, there are media reports expressing displeasure of Indian households towards rising cost of living. But wait a minute. On one hand, the prices are rising, and on the other hand, the Indian farmer is distressed for not being able to recover even the cost of their produce. Well, something is clearly wrong, and this and more we will be discussing today on our budget special. Today, in the studio, we are joined by two experts, Dr. Siraj Hussain, former Secretary at Ministry of Agriculture and visiting Senior Fellow at ICRAE. Sir, we welcome you. And Kapil Mandabewala, founder of Edible Roots, and organization that provides consulting services for organic farming. So welcome you too. And in fact, the agriculture sector is pictured synonymous with poverty in India. And how much has government allocated to the sector over the years? Has it been optimally utilized? Our correspondent Aditya Dhuna brings you the story.
"60 years ago, Mother India, a Bollywood classic from the 1950s, documented India's agrarian crisis post-independence. Back then, India's agriculture sector was hampered by British rule and shackled by landlords and the lack of resources. Since then, the Indian farmer has come a long way. The Indian agriculture sector ranks second worldwide in terms of farm output. It employs over half of India's population, making it the largest employer in the country. And exports from agriculture constitute just 10% of the overall exports of the country. So what is holding India's agriculture sector back? Last year's Indian Economic Survey argues that India's agriculture is in a way a victim of its own past success. The report claims that the sector has become cereal-centric and as a result, regionally biased and input-intensive. Other challenges include lack of access to quality warehouses, continuous use of redundant technologies, and a need for better organization of credit facilities. Last year, the Indian government hiked the budget of agriculture sector by 44%, making major allocations towards crop insurance, better pulse production, and drought assistance. Allocations were also made towards setting up an e-market for wholesale sales. The government said with this budget, they aim to double farmer incomes. A majority of these funds went to improving irrigation facilities. More than 2 million hectares of land was to be bought under irrigation under a government scheme. As many as 89 irrigation projects costing more than 800 billion rupees was to be fast-tracked. And a dedicated long-term irrigation fund was to be created with an initial corpus of 200 billion rupees. When the Finance Ministry in a Twitter poll asked which sector should be the focus of this year's budget, the agriculture sector topped the charts. Hit by the slowdown post-demonetization and with drought hitting farmers in at least 10 states last year, it remains to be seen what the Finance Minister has in store for the agriculture sector in this year's budget. In New Delhi, Aditya Dhuna for WION.
So in this special segment today, we are actually discussing on agricultural sector. In fact, Mr. Siraj, as we saw in the report just right now, the government has actually announced several measures to ease the problems in the sector. But you think something has to be done more? What is going wrong at the moment?
Actually, we have to understand that agriculture is a state subject. So even though the media devotes a lot of time to analyzing the central budget, but a lot more emphasis needs to be given to the analysis of the state budgets, especially regarding their allocations to agriculture. So the central government has been doing its bit, but a lot more can be done by coordinating the activities in agriculture sector with the policies of the state governments. Now, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, the pace of reform in the agriculture sector has not been as much as the central government would like it to be. as a result of which agriculture sector continues to be highly fragmented, even though it employs about 50% of population,
Right.
and yet the contribution to GDP is just about 14%.
Absolutely. In fact, if you talk about the other part of it, as in the organic farming, which is actually quite popular these days, Kapil, you've been an organic farmer yourself. So is agriculture commercially viable activity these days?
It can be commercially viable. The way a lot of the systems are set right now, it doesn't seem to be like that. One of the key sort of things I noticed when I started farming in India about 9 years ago when I came back from US was over a few years of farming, I soon realized that there was one key factor that determined why the farmer was not able to make it profitable. And that factor is basically the setting of the price of the produce. If you take any other commodity, a car or a pen or a chair, the seller decides the price of that commodity. But in this case, in the case of farming and agriculture, the price is decided by the buyers. The farmer in most cases just takes the produce to the nearest mandi and keeps his product over there, and he has no say beyond that to control the price. So in terms of what can be done, is somehow the mechanisms need to be put in place so the farmer is empowered to be able to take those decisions where he can control the price, where he can control where he is selling, and also get involved more in selling his own produce. This can be done through various mechanisms. For example, a cooperative can be formed in a village where they collectively market their own produce through minimizing the channels that are involved in the middlemen that are involved in the whole process.
Right. So it's more profitable for the farmers. In fact, Siraj, while talking to people on the ground that are associated with the sector, they said that the price at which the agriculture commodities are sold in the market, which Kapil also mentioned, at the ground rate, farmers cannot even make profits. In fact, despite the cry of inflation. So what's your take on this?
No, it varies from commodity to commodity, and also it depends on the timing in the market. So it is not correct to say that farmers make losses in all crops at all times. Otherwise, there would be no farming at all. But it is true that when the production is high, for example, this year the production of pulses in Kharif crop was much higher than last year, then the prices fall. And when the prices fall, as he was mentioning, at times there are no buyers or there is a cartel of buyers. So it is necessary that the marketing reforms are taken up by all the state governments, and highest priority is given to that. Unfortunately, the subject has not received the attention it deserved from many state governments.
Right. So where does the problem lie? Kapil, in fact, do you think that correcting the current structural problems makes agriculture more efficient and reduces the prices of commodities?
Say that again, please.
So is it, and are there any cultural reforms that are required at this moment?
I think definitely. I think the lot of the money that is being spent, for example, I think from what I hear in the discussion that last year a lot of the money was spent on irrigation, for example, which is a great measure because as we know the water is the main resource that we are misusing as of now. So a lot of drip irrigation systems have been installed around the country. But I think the main reform that probably is required is, like Mr. Siraj also mentioned, is in the marketing of it. In how can the farmer be empowered? An example could be setting up of small value addition units in each village where the farmer can add value to their own produce. This is how the organic farmers are doing right now. The reason they are able to make it sustainable, or the way they are able to make it sustainable, even though the yields are slightly lower as compared to chemical farming, is because they have reached out directly to their customer. They are able, and because of that, they are able to set prices on their produce or whatever they are growing, and hence they can make a better margins on the produce. As we know, the farmer gets about a third to a quarter of what the actual final retail price is. So if you're paying 40 rupees a kilo for a tomato, the farmer is getting about 10 rupees or 12 rupees. That's what he's getting. So the way that can be increased is by reducing the middleman and getting the farmer closer to the consumer.
Right. In fact, Mr. Siraj, last time the budget actually focused on farmers, agricultural sector. But this time it seems to be more on the housing sector. Why the shift has been, as in this shift towards housing sector? Have we done enough for the agricultural sector?
No, I do not agree that the focus of the budget is going to be housing sector, because right now what is going to happen.
I beg your pardon, because there was a survey done actually. In fact, people had to give their answers on this. and people actually wanted the finance minister to focus more on housing sector.
No, the difficulty is that in such surveys which are conducted over Twitter or other electronic devices,
That
the
segment
people
is
who
not
participate
included, right.
are not farmers or rural people. It is just point something % of population which participates in these surveys. So, but even then agriculture I am sure is going to be accorded high priority in the budget, because after all food security of the nation is provided by the farmers, and 50% of population is dependent on agriculture. So, unless agriculture thrives, rural areas cannot prosper, and it is necessary for food security of the country that farming continues to be profitable. So, the government of India has taken a number of measures in the last few years. The three most important measures are the crop insurance scheme, what is called the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the electronic national agriculture market which was set up by the government last year, and the price stabilization fund. In addition to that, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which was also shown in your film, was also given budgetary allocation. Now, the thing is that unless the states come forward, as I mentioned in the beginning, agriculture cannot change in the states, because after all it is a state subject, and therefore, I would urge media like you to also examine the state budgets more thoroughly.
So, post demonetization, what effect do you see, Kapil?
I think there might be some impact to the produce and the prices of the produce, but I think a lot of the seasonal variations in the prices. For example, when we heard in the news that the onion prices were very low, and it could be any other commodity, and that's typical. If you see the history over the past years, that's typical when the main harvesting season comes for any particular produce, and the season is conducive for it, the harvest tends to be a bumper, and the prices tend to go down in that season. But other than that, I think I was just recently visiting some of my farmer friends in my local town, and they did complain a bit about that, how because of the cash flow being a bit slowed down, they had to go through a few challenges. But I think that is getting normalized. In terms of prices, I think that's not really going to affect in the long term of the produce.
All right, so here we'll slip into a short break, and after break we'll ask our guest what are their expectations from the upcoming budget. We'll be back soon. Keep watching Beyond. You're watching Beyond, and this union budget segment we are talking about agricultural sector today. Farmers are aware of modern amenities but cannot avail them. For a vegetable to reach from farm to the kitchen, there are scores of middlemen in between. So can we avoid these middlemen? Can we break this nexus? Our correspondent Brinda Agarwal brings you the story.
These farmers in Shampur village in western Uttar Pradesh supply vegetables to nearby cities. For the past 3 years, they have been selling their cabbage produce at a loss of 1 rupee per kilogram. They tell us that while they are aware of modern amenities that can make crop production much more efficient, they are unable to deploy these owing to a lack of funds.
ऐसे में अगर सरकार हमें ड्रिप इरिगेशन के में थोड़ा प्रोत्साहित करे, ड्रिप इरिगेशन के बारे में समझाए और हमें अवेलेबल कराए। जैसे कि हम इसके अंदर पानी भरते हैं इस नाली के अंदर, वो पानी कई बार कम या ज़्यादा भी हो जाता है। कई बार इसके ऊपर आ गया तो आप देख रहे हैं ये फ्रूट्स सारे नीचे लगे हुए हैं। इन फ्रूट्स के ऊपर पानी आएगा तो ये इनमें गलन आएगी, ये खराब हो जाएंगे। किसान की स्थिति इतनी टूटी हुई है, कमर किसान की इतनी टूटी हुई है कि वो इन सब चीज़ों को जानते हुए भी नहीं कर सकते हम लोग।
Leaving aside modernization, basic inputs such as good quality seeds and regular electricity supply are also not in place.
पहली बात तो अभी हापुड़ के अंदर मतलब हमारे इधर शायद मैं मानता हूँ कि पूरे उत्तर प्रदेश में भी इस तरह की व्यवस्था है ही नहीं कि हमें जो है बीज अच्छे बीज जो है जो संकर प्रजाति जिन्हें हाइब्रिड बीज बोल रहे हैं हम, ये भी सभी हाइब्रिड वैरायटी हैं, ये अवेलेबल ही नहीं है।
तो बिजली जब हमें जरूरत नहीं होती जब तो बिजली हमें भरपूर मिलती है, और जब बिजली की जरूरत होती है जब बिजली भरपूर नहीं मिलती, और जो मिलती भी है तो उसमें फॉल्ट कितने हो जाते हैं कि उसके वो फॉल्टों में ही चली जाती है।
The government has rolled out several schemes to ease the problems that farmers face, but these schemes have many caveats.
हेल्पलाइन से अभी होता क्या है, सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम ये आती है कि जैसे एक आम किसान की हम बात करें, ये पौधा है ये रोगग्रस्त है, ये बीमार पौधा है, हम इसमें हम अपनी भाषा में जो फ़ोन पे कहेंगे, जो उस कॉल करके हम पूछेंगे, वो कहेंगे जी हमारे पत्ते पे जो है ये बैंगनी कलर के स्पॉट आ रहे हैं, एक साइड सूख रही है जी। तो होता क्या है कि वो एक तरह से इस तरह से मतलब वो समझाएंगे, एक अनुमान से समझाएंगे। हम चाहते हैं कि सरकार इस तरह की आगे मतलब नियम लेके आए, इस तरह की फैसिलिटी किसान को मिले कि वो डॉक्टर लोग जो है ना, जैसे सिर्फ कॉल से बात नहीं बनने वाली।
ये सरकार की बहुत अच्छी स्कीम है, लेकिन हम इसमें ये चाहते हैं कि थोड़ा दूसरी फसलों को भी इसमें शामिल कर लिया जाए। सब्जी की फसल है, जैसे हमारा इलाका सब्जी उगाता है, तो इसमें आलू को भी शामिल कर लिया जाए, पत्ता गोभी को, बंदा गोभी को, ताकि कोई बीमारी इन फसलों में दौड़े तो किसान को उसकी भी क्षतिपूर्ति मिल जाए।
After the farmer readies his produce, there is a nexus of middlemen in between before the vegetable reaches the kitchen. The farmer sells his produce to a middleman in a mandi, commonly called adatiya, who then sells it to a middleman who buy the produce in bulk. This is then sold to street vendors and finally it reaches our homes. By the time the vegetable reaches the kitchen, the cost has escalated by 15 to 20%. Talking to farmers and middlemen, we find that agriculture remains a sustainable activity. But one disruption, like a drought or a demonetization, can make it difficult for farmers.
जहाँ तक मेरा अपना अनुमान है, इस नोटबंदी से, जिस दिन नोटबंदी की घोषणा प्रधानमंत्री जी ने रात को करी है 8 बजे, उस दिन सुबह के टाइम बंद गोभी का कट्टा, जिसमें करीब 50 किलो बंद गोभी थी, वो 700 और 800 रुपये के बीच में किसान की बिक रही थी। अगले ही दिन वो 600 रुपये की बिकी, फिर उससे अगले दिन वो 500 रुपये की बिकी, फिर उससे अगले दिन वो 400 की बिकी, और आज आलम यह है कि 50, 60 और 70 रुपये का वो कट्टा बिक रहा है। बैंक से पैसे नहीं मिले, मार्केट से हमारे पास नहीं आए, क्योंकि हमारे पास तो छोटे छोटे खरीदार में कोई 1000 का, कोई 2000 का, कोई 4000 का, कोई 5000 का। बैंक से उनके पास रुपए नहीं आए, हमारे पास उनसे नहीं आए, हमें भी बैंक से नहीं मिले। तो मार्केट तो बिल्कुल मेरी नज़र में ध्वस्त हो चुकी है।
Agriculture sector is the chief lifeline of any nation. It is a sector that feeds an entire country. And yet in India we see that this sector is synonymous with high levels of poverty. Every year the Indian government is spending millions and billions of dollars for the upliftment of this sector, but the Indian farmer is yet to see that money reaching it. Since independence, we see that this sector is still marred with several structural problems, from the lack of availability of high quality seeds to irrigation to the lack of availability of agricultural implements, electricity and several others. And the worst part is that this has a direct bearing on not only the farmers but also the end consumers, as it increases the cost of the vegetables and the cereals by almost 20%. So what is it that the Indian government needs to do? It is clearly something phenomenal that we expect from our government for the upliftment of this sector. Vrinda Agarwal with Kamran Ahmed, WION, New Delhi.
So we just showed you how the vegetable prices escalate from actually farm to kitchen. In fact, Kapil, I would like to ask you, like many other schemes, government has actually come up with e-marketing scheme. So can this actually break this nexus?
I think in a way it can. The way the social media and the networks are getting, and they are reaching to the villages, but I think it will need a bit more than that, because the average farmer doesn't know how to use these networks. So some mechanisms have been put in place where the youth in the villages or the children of the farmers, because as I have traveled across India, I've seen that the farming people who are actually farming on the field, the age has gotten older and older because the youth wants to shift to the cities, while they want to, because they don't see the farming as a profitable venture. But if the youth can be involved in this, in the marketing of their produce, they can be trained on this, and somehow if they can connect directly to the consumer in various ways, they can form cooperatives or collectives in a village where the women can also get involved in adding value to their produce. For example, they can create ketchup out of their tomatoes, or a biscuit out of their wheat, for example. So if they can do that, then this whole way they can connect to the even bigger towns from where they are and create a direct market for the produce, and that can really make an impact.
Like awareness and educating farmers. In fact, Mr. Siraj, we have many agriculture institutes and universities doing research on this. But is this research even reaching farmers? Is this actually helping them?
Of course it reaches. The thing is that people do not get to know about that. For example, now India is one of the largest exporters of basmati rice because of the development of a new variety called Pusa 1124. Only the other day, yesterday, there was a report in Indian Express which mentioned how a new variety of cane, sugar cane 0238, which is bred by a scientist in Coimbatore, has changed the scenario in UP, because the variety is shorter duration and it matures at a very appropriate time of October, November, when the sugar mills start crushing. So, scientists have developed varieties which are high yielding, resistant to pests, better adapted to our climate. There is a variety of paddy, for example, which can withstand floods, Saibhagi rice, which is grown in Bihar and Jharkhand.
Right.
But we need to do much more. So, we can say that our scientists have ensured that the yields we get are higher as compared to the past, but we need to do much more, invest more
like
in
educating
science.
farmers and creating more and more awareness. In fact, a couple closing remarks from you. What are your expectations from the upcoming budget?
I think, as I mentioned again, the marketing is the key. So empowering the farmers to where they can reach out to directly to the market. One other thing on the farming side of on the production side of things, if there can be a push around how the farmer can get into more integrated ways of farming, wherein I have seen examples of like this in the mountain areas like Uttarakhand and all, where the farmer grows multiple crops in the same field at the same time. What that does is it diversifies the risk of the farmer, so that any natural calamity will not impact. Like if there's a crop that gets damaged by one pest, the other crops are still there. So such systems of farming can be integrated to minimize the risk on the farmer's side, and the marketing mechanism on the front end, so that they can get a better price for the produce by reducing the middleman.
Mr. Suraj, what are your expectations?
No, I expect that the government of India will provide sufficient funds for the flagship schemes like the crop insurance scheme, like the National Agriculture Market Scheme, the Price Stabilization Fund, and there will be an added thrust on research, which we have briefly discussed. Also, I expect that government of India will take some view, final view on the introduction of genetically modified crops, because these discussions have gone on for years, but they have not been resolved. So, I hope there will be some resolution to that.
Right, we hope that too, and we'll keep an eye on that and update you on the same. Thank you so much, Mr. Siraj Hussain, Mr. Kapil Mandavewala, for joining us in this special segment and discussing the agricultural reforms and what is needed for the farmers actually. That's all with me in this bulletin. We'll slip into a short break, but keep watching Beyond.